It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Jen Cohen as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives in Yavapai County. And now, here's today's Countywide.
Always, it's great to have you in the studio today. We're checking in with the Coconino National Forest. We have Fire Staff Officer Duane Tewa back. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And then Forest Spokesman Brady Smith, who you hear on the air all the time, along with George Josens. George is not with us today, but Brady is here today. CoconinoNationalForest.us is the website, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Does everybody have that easy of a website? Or is
no,
it just special?
We purchased that domain name so we make it easy.
I tell you. It's easy. They should all do that.
I know they should.
CoconinoNationalForest.us. That's nice and easy. We were talking before the show, and I think the people watching, listening would agree that we go from 1 week, extreme fire danger, partial closures, fire restrictions galore across the land. 1 week later, they're all gone. It's just a memory. They're all gone. But it really paid off this year to have these fire restrictions. And it's nice to see that they're gone now. People can get back out and recreate outdoors and do their campfires in the evening and do it responsibly. We'll talk more about that towards the end of the show. But it's nice to see that. I'm going camping this weekend. We haven't gone hardly at all this summer, but maybe a couple of times. So we'll be back out at it this weekend. Arizona State Forestry put out a press release towards the end of last week that was really great news. 90,000 acres is about what we've had burned this year. Now this is a week old, so we've had more burn than that, but right around 90,000 acres is burned so far this wildfire season, as opposed to more than 300,000 last year. Wow, that's a huge difference, right?
Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
So what's the reason for such a reduction?
Well, obviously, we experienced a very dry fall last fall, as well as that carried over into the spring. So we kind of had a pretty good idea that our indices were going to begin to climb exponentially as we got into early spring, mid-spring, and then the onset of summer. So with that in mind, obviously we're monitoring all those conditions, looking at fire danger. And an indicator for us was our prescribed burning that we were trying to complete right around early to mid-April. And that was an indicator that what we were seeing as far as our indices go and what we track as far as our energy release component, how dry those large fuels are out on the ground, the fire behavior was validating what we were seeing from our weather stations and from what we were tracking as far as our indices go. So that was our very good indicator for us to start to consider. We may want to start thinking about moving into some level of restriction. Obviously we go into stage 1 typically, but that didn't preclude us from jumping right into stage 2 with absolutely no campfires. But what we were seeing was still we had some hope that there might be some moisture coming in late April, early part of May. So we went in April 27th to stage 1 restrictions. Okay. And then obviously the same day we had the tinder fire start down on the Mogollon Rim.
And we're going to get into that too. That's probably the worst fire on the Coconino National Forest this year was the tinder fire. You did mention though that we did get a couple of shots in the arm with some moisture. Correct. Which was pretty nice. That kind of, I don't know, like we kept getting these little Band-Aids throughout the spring where it would be really horribly dry and hot, and then all of a sudden we'd have this little storm move through, and it was nice. You mentioned prior to the show, Duane, that we managed to actually get quite a bit of prescribed burning done despite the dry conditions. We did get ahead on that.
Absolutely. So we had an increase in our accomplishment for what we're supposed to accomplish as a forest. Had an increase of about 10,000 acres. Our typical accomplishment is 25,000 acres, so this year was expected that we try to complete 35,000 acres. Going into the fall, how dry the fall was really opened up that window of opportunity to accomplish a lot of acreage. And I believe last fall was the first year that we had accomplished the most we had ever done in any prescribed fire fall season. I think we had completed close to 18,000 acres of prescribed burning in the fall. So obviously when weather shifts and typically, you know, we expect some sort of weather to come in right around Thanksgiving, between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And that essentially kind of shuts us down at that point. This year we extended all the way into early to mid-December with some prescribed burning. That's how good the conditions were for that type of an activity, though that's not how we kind of wanted to see it. We wanted to see more moisture, but it gave us an opportunity to extend our prescribed fire window. And then that obviously carried over into the spring with kind of those limited shots of moisture that you mentioned, opened up some additional opportunities for us to get in there and accomplish more prescribed fire. We knew we were going to get close about April, early April, mid-April, which is kind of our typical window for spring burning to get the rest of the acreage completed. We did give a very, very good shot at completing that. We came up about 1,500 acres short just based on the conditions, how quickly they were starting to deteriorate and change, and validating that with the fire behavior we were seeing. We just weren't getting the fire effects. So we just decided at that point that we're going to have to call it. So that's
Arizona though. Everything is quick. I mean, well, we just started out the show. I mean, 1 week we're extreme fire danger, and now here we are a week later, and you know the ground is so wet that now we've got the flooding aspect of the monsoon going on. So you don't have to worry about that the first week of the monsoon, but that second week, wow, it's really, really bad. You guys have been really focused on getting around all the communities. And that's what the prescribed burning is really all about. It's you guys are really creating like this huge defensible space buffer around, I want to say Flagstaff, Coconino Village, Mountain Air,
Munns Park,
Munns Park,
yep.
Mormon Lake.
Yep.
And so have we completed that? Are we really close to having like this really nice buffer between forest that still needs to be worked on, but now we've managed to, I mean, how many miles are we talking about here? That's a huge swath of land that we're trying to create this defensible space around.
Yeah, it's a fairly significant portion of our forest and what we try to concentrate on. Mm-hmm. And those treatments have been going on for years, because you can't just treat it once and then expect that that's going to stay that same way for 50 years.
Sure.
There's actually an interval tied to when we go back and reinitiate another entry of prescribed fire, or any other treatment for that matter. So when you look at it, we may treat it in 2018, but in 2023 we may have to go back in there, or 2025 have to go back in there and reintroduce. So it's almost like we have to strategically move around and maintain those areas with prescribed fire entries, sure, or any other type of mechanical treatment in those areas, because those are our most vulnerable areas with our southwest flow and our southwest pattern, and how some of those canyons align, like Pump House Wash that comes into Coconino Village.
That was the big one during the slide fire.
Yes, that was the big concern, absolutely.
Right.
So those areas we try to focus on and concentrate on, because that is probably going to give us the biggest problems if we ever get a fire start down in Pump House Wash. And we're going to rely on those fuels treatments, much like we did on the slide fire when it came up out of Oak Creek Canyon and got up on top. Tremendous amount of fuels treatments up on top that allowed the firefighters to get in there and really stop it in its tracks.
I actually saw some of that this last weekend. We went out hiking. We were in that area, and you could see, and my wife was like, oh, there was a wildfire through here. I said, no, I think this is where they kind of started to do burnout operations. Correct. Back towards Pump House Wash and towards the rim of the canyon, because the fire was working its way up that edge. And you guys knew that if it got up on top there, it was going to race across the landscape. And then we've got the Forest Highlands and a lot of places out there that are key to keep. We got to take our first break already. We'll take our first break. Fire Staff Officer for the Coconino National Forest, Duane Tewa, in studio today. Also Brady Smith, spokesperson for the Forest Service. Stick around, countywide, back in just a couple minutes.
It appears these hot ashes are about to be dumped, which could possibly start a wildfire. How will Smokey deal with such a hot situation? The garden hose defense. Next, a thorough stir. Then another spray. And finally, feeling if the ashes are cool.
Oh, yeah.
Ah yes, the selfie. A ritual practiced so frequently with this tribe, but not so much by Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Being prepared is a part of who you are. But it's especially important in the case of a disaster. Be informed about possible emergencies in your area. Make a plan that covers where you'll go in an emergency. Build a kit with the things you need to survive. There's no one more capable of planning for your situation than you. Start your plan today. Go to ready.gov/myplan.
Welcome back to Countywide. We're sitting down with the Coconino National Forest today. Duane, Tewa, and Brady Smith are in studio. We've been talking about just kind of the lead up to the wildfire season. Wildfire season, it's not over, right? We can't say wildfire season's over.
No, I don't think we'll ever say it's over, really.
Yeah, I think we've agreed over the years now that it's wildfire season year round, depending on what Mother Nature's bringing to the state of Arizona. And this last fall and winter and spring was not much, but now here we are monsoon season, and it's really come down. Brady, the public awareness campaign this year for me seemed different than any other year, where I think we even talked about in the past where you would actually have to be living under a rock to not know that fire restrictions were put in place. I mean, there were billboards, the portable ADOT signs. I don't know if you guys own those or if you rent them from ADOT or what it is, but they're on the side of the highways that say no campfires, no charcoal. What were some of the other things we saw this year?
Well, you heard a lot of it on the radio and then in the newspaper. You saw a lot of it on the news and television and the Phoenix media market as well. And I think it was largely because not only the Coconino National Forest just by itself, but a lot, if not all of the Northern Arizona National Forest went into restrictions around the same time, had area closures around the same time, and then of course the state and city and county implemented restrictions and closures to a certain extent at the same time. So it almost seemed like the state was shutting down to a certain extent, but I think it was just because all these entities were coming together and coordinating, and it was all happening at the same time. So it was really newsworthy, and it was out in the news quite a bit. So
I know for our email, you could sit there and watch and say, okay, you guys sent out your press release saying we're going to go to stage 1 fire restrictions. You could almost watch, and then you'd see Central Arizona fire, Verde Valley fire, and you'd start seeing them throughout the day, and it's like, well, don't write it up just yet. And then you'd get this cluster for the day and say, okay, these are the guys that are in restrictions today. And then the next day you'd have a bunch more. And it became a point where you were finally just telling people, okay, before you go to the forest, visit their website, find out what's open, what's closed. Okay. And before you do anything in your own yard, call your local fire jurisdiction and find out what's going on in your own backyard.
And that's part of the challenge, really, when you implement these kind of things is there are different requirements and different restrictions in the county as they are compared to the national forest. And so you might be able to do one thing in the county or the city or the state and not in the national forest, or vice versa. So there's just little tweaks here and there, but we all try to coordinate with one another as far as the timing goes, because we know that it's going to result in a lot of confusion if, for example, something as simple as the Coconino National Forest going into restrictions, but maybe not the Kaibab, and we border one another. And so we're always coordinating with one another to go in at the same time, because conditions are similar most of the time, although they can differ on the national forest. But we want to reduce that public confusion and allow people to really understand what regulations and what restrictions are in place.
Typically it increases from the south to the north. You could watch that happen where
Absolutely.
You've got Tonto, you've got the southern part of the state which goes into fire restrictions well before just about everybody else does. But then once you see the Tonto kick in and the Prescott National Forest kick in, Coconino and Kaibab tend to stay out of that for just a little bit, maybe a week or two at the most, and then they follow suit as well. So it pretty much spreads like a virus from the south to the north.
It can be, but it also can change sometimes, because the different type of fuel that is in the Tonto is a lot different most of the time than what is in the Coconino. And so they might not be going into fire restrictions in a certain area in Tonto because there's really no fuel for anything to burn. Whereas when we reach a certain criteria of fuel moisture that has lessened in the forest, we have a lot of fuel that can burn. And so we might enter into restriction, whereas in an area in the Tonto that's more desert and less fuel might not, even though they've met the criteria that would normally make us go into a fire restriction.
Gotcha. Okay. Duane, you got some numbers too. In terms of compliance this year so far for our wildfire season.
So the last year we had a full forest closure was in 2006, and if we go back and look at that data, we had 98 human-caused fires during that period and 317 lightning-caused fires. So it's a little bit of an anomaly with the Coconino National Forest, meaning that we are kind of in that lightning zone. So typically, on average, we average more lightning fires than human-caused fires. Although the last several years we've been really closely tracking our abandoned campfires, which are technically illegal campfires when you walk away from one that isn't fully extinguished. Last year we ended up with 699 abandoned campfires, a tremendous number. So we're continuing to track that, and this year what we found with the area closures, instead of going to a full forest closure, the area closures and how we defined our area closures was those areas that would give us, meaning firefighters, less probability of being able to catch it. So you got flat ground, which is most of the Coconino Plateau, but those areas like Pump House Wash, where they're very gnarly canyons, the topography and wind alignment and how it's configured with a southwest flow that has any kind of slope to it and any kind of fuel to it, and as dry as the fields were, those were going to be tremendous challenges for us to even pick those fires up. Hence the Tinder fire was a prime example of that. Everything just aligned perfectly, and that's where that fire took off and consequently took out 33 homes. And having a fire of that magnitude early on in the season really got us to thinking, where are our most vulnerable areas? And that's where we came up with our 6 closure areas, the peaks, Mount Eldon, Mormon Mountain, Fossil Creek, Mogollon Rim just south of 87, and the stuff south of Kachina Village and Pump House Wash area. So those were the areas we felt like if we were going to get a start there, those were going to be very, very challenging for us to pick up. So that being our decision, as we looked forward to compliance, obviously we had a couple major holidays in there, Memorial Day being one and 4th of July being the other. We looked and basically tried to anticipate what that visitor use was. And traditionally, when we go into stage 1 restrictions or stage 2 restrictions, it takes a little while for that messaging that we talked about to really get out there. And we will still see some higher numbers early on. But as we started to track those numbers week by week, they started reducing tremendously, significantly. We went from, I believe, right after Memorial Day, we had 60-some at that point. We went and did those area closures. They were illegal campfires. Those dropped down to low teens to single digits eventually through the 10.5 weeks, the remaining part of the 10.5 weeks that we were in either restrictions and or closures. So we felt like the messaging was getting out there. The campaign certainly contributed to a lot of that messaging, and our compliance was certainly on par with what we would like to see in those type of situations, because going into closures is not something we take lightly. So having the area closures still balance the need for folks to get out in the woods and recreate still, but then really try to protect those most vulnerable areas that we felt like were going to give us challenges for preventing another Schultz fire, as an example. So compliance was really, really good this year, and having some conversations with our partners, the Prescott, the Kaibab, the Apache Sitgreaves, and the Tano, they were seeing some similar results with compliance. So obviously visitor use went down because people those areas that they like to recreate in were some of those areas that were closed off. So, we still try to invite the public to come up and recreate. However, some felt like that wasn't what they wanted to do until we got sufficient rains to really have them come back in, like you mentioned. You wanted to go camping and have a campfire. Yes,
here it is. Yeah. All right, let's take another break. Coconino National Forest Fire Staff Officer Duane Tewa in studio, along with Brady Smith. Stick around, Countywide. Back in just a couple minutes.
This is Bruce Morrow, Transportation Manager for Cottonwood Area Transit. Remember, we cover the entire Verde Valley and Sedona. Cottonwood Area Transit has you covered wherever you want to ride in the Verde Valley, all day, every day. Take Cottonwood Area Transit through Clarkdale, Verde Village, and from 26 locations in Cottonwood. With Verde Links, it's a quick and easy trip to Sedona every day. Don't forget our connectors to Camp Verde. Visit cottonwoodaz.gov for Cottonwood Area Transit and take a seat. Let's go ride.
What to expect when you're expecting.
Like here?
A teenager.
Today, I'm going to show you how to teen-proof your home. First step, hide the car keys. Preferably somewhere they would never look. Challenges will come up. Be ready for them. Hi, honey.
Ready for the... Mom, you don't use mannequins in the mannequin challenge.
You don't have to know it all to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
If you don't fix them, sparks from dragging tow chains could cause a wildfire, and that could be scary. Ah, Smokey! Only you can prevent wildfires.
Welcome back to Countywide. We've got just a few minutes left of the program. We're going to punch list a few things for you real quick. Watershed work has resumed in the Flagstaff area.
Flagstaff Watershed Protection Project, yes. There's some logging activity that's starting right there around the base of Mount Eldon. So there's some trails that are closed and there's some roads that are closed that people need to be aware of, and the logging truck traffic that's going to be in the area.
And this was the project that was being worked on, but the contractor didn't quite make a dent in it.
Yeah.
So now we found somebody new to come in, and they're going to go ahead. They've got a year to finish up. I think it was like 642 acres is what if I remember right. 642 acres. So, okay, so that's good news. That's going to protect the watershed for the Flagstaff region. Resources are being released from the fires. I noticed that too. There was a nice goodbye to one of the helicopter pilots that's been here for the wildfire season. Not that it's over. We don't want to say the wildfire season's over. It's just, it's relaxed a little bit more. We're feeling a little bit better with all the rain. But some of the resources are being released to other areas.
Correct. So as our traditional fire season here in the Southwest, we kind of kick off the western fire season starting in May and June. And then July, once monsoons start, obviously that heat wave starts traveling further north. So Utah, Nevada, the Great Basin, they're starting to pick up their fire season right now. Northern California is getting pretty active. Southern Oregon is getting very active. And as you watch the weather and the lightning that's coming through some of those areas, you can kind of start seeing where those areas are going to get quite a bit of activity going on. So with that, obviously they come down during our fire season to help us, so we reciprocate and start cutting some resources loose to go assist them.
Okay, so it's really important now that we're careful with campfires, make sure they're dead out, never leave them unattended. You always have to make sure the fire is out. God, if it gets loose, you don't want to be the person that did, oh my God, I started that fire, you know. They're going to name a fire after my campfire that I didn't put out. So you got to make sure we do that. Pick up trash in the forest. There's no trash service in the forest. We have Brady talk about that all the time. We're not going to have you talk about it too much this time because we know there's no trash service in the forest. And what else did I have here? A little prescribed burning probably taking place, I would imagine. I noticed I think Kaibab's doing some prescribed burning. I mean, it just seems so weird. You know, a week ago, we would not have even thought about talking about this, but here we are. Prescott National Forest doing some prescribed burning on the Verde Ranger District. Kaibab's doing some. I imagine you've got some too. You get about 30 seconds. Is there some prescribed burning?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got about 1,500 acres left to finish our accomplishment, and as soon as we start drying out a little bit and the conditions are right, we're going to jump right back into it.
Any particular area?
Right now, we're looking at around Mormon Lake in that area, and then north of the peaks are the two potential areas we have identified right now.
All right, Duane, thank you so much for coming in. It was good to see you again. Brady, you're too far away now. Well, anyways, that's the show today. So CoconinoNationalForest.us is the website. Thanks for watching, listening. This is Countywide. We'll talk to you again next time.